The wedding took place at a countryside venue outside Pittsburgh, the kind of place Helen used to point to in magazines, circled with hopeful little hearts and notes in the margins like, "Someday" or "Maybe Lauren." Whitewashed barn walls, crystal chandeliers hanging from exposed beams, and rows of rose-draped chairs that looked like they'd collapse under the weight of the guests' expectations. It was a fantasy brought to life, one I funded down to the last dessert fork. I remember walking through the venue with Helen during the final walkthrough. She smiled at every detail. She talked about Lauren like she was a princess coming home from war. "She deserves this," she said, running her hand along the hem of the tablecloth like it was spun gold. "She's been through so much." She said that a lot. She's been through so much, as if her father leaving was a fresh wound, not something I'd been patching for over a decade. As if the years I'd spent stepping into his shadow hadn't earned me at least a footnote in her story. But in our home, sacrifice had no memory. Gratitude had no language. It was just expected. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early. I ironed my shirt in the guest room because Lauren didn't want me in any of the getting ready pictures. I remember staring at myself in the mirror, shirt crisp, tie hanging loose around my neck, and feeling a hollowness I couldn't name. I looked like a man dressing for someone else's life. Helen didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't say a word. She was already in mother of the bride mode, busy, breathless, floating room to room like she'd waited her whole life for this stage. When we arrived at the venue, no one greeted me. The photographers were busy snapping pictures of Lauren and her bridesmaids. Helen was whisked away for touch-ups and corsages. I stood there on the gravel, watching the world spin around me like a man misplaced. I kept reminding myself, this is her day. It's not about you. Don't ruin it. That phrase had become my inner monologue over the years, an unspoken agreement I'd signed the moment I stepped into their lives. The ceremony passed like a postcard. Vows under the oak tree. Laughter. Applause. Lauren looked radiant, and for a brief moment, watching her slip that ring on her new husband's hand, I told myself it was worth it, that the countless checks, the sleepless nights, the quiet endurance, it had built something. Maybe she'd never say it out loud, but somewhere in her heart, she knew who had been there when the others had walked away. Then came the reception. White linen tables, blush pink centerpieces, a jazz trio that cost more than my first car. I sat at the edge of it all, next to Helen, across from distant cousins and acquaintances who referred to me as the stepdad, as if it were a role in a school play. And then Lauren stood up. She clinked her glass and smiled, that performative smile she'd worn since high school, the kind she used when she wanted to appear grateful without feeling it. She held the microphone with the confidence of someone who had always been adored. "I just want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice clear, rehearsed, theatrical. "It means the world to us, especially those who made this day possible." She looked at her new husband. He grinned, handsome and unaware. Then her eyes drifted to Helen. "And to my mom," she said, her voice softening, "who has always been my anchor, my best friend, my safe place." Helen teared up. The room cooed. I kept my face still. "And finally," Lauren said, turning her attention to me, "I want to thank Michael for his support." There was a pause, a calculated pause. She tilted her head, as if deciding whether to go further. Then she smiled wider. "I mean, let's be honest. Every wedding needs a good sponsor." The laughter was light, safe, the kind people give when they don't know if something's a joke or a jab. I waited for her to clarify, to say I'm kidding, to follow it up with something real. But nothing came. Instead, I watched as heads nodded, smiles spread, and suddenly the line wasn't offensive, it was accepted, understood, even expected. I looked at Helen. She didn't laugh. She didn't correct her. She didn't even look at me, just kept her eyes on the centerpiece like it was blooming something interesting. That's when the clarity hit. Cold and clean. This wasn't a slip. It wasn't a joke. It was a declaration. I was never family. I was a function. The man who fills the fridge, signs the checks, and stands silently in the photos. Not father. Not protector. Not partner. Just sponsor. I thought about the years. The Christmas mornings where I played Santa while her real dad sent a text 3 hours late. The late-night drives to pick her up when her car broke down. The way I walked her through FAFSA forms and watched her cry over rejection letters and sat with her until her hands stopped shaking. All of it reduced to a single word. Sponsor. My mind drifted further back. To the day she turned 16 and I handed her the keys to her first car. Used, yes, but clean, reliable, safe. Her real dad had promised to help with it, but didn't show. Covered it. She hugged me that day, called me dad once. I had held onto that word like a life raft. But it had been a lie. Or a loan. Something borrowed, never meant to stay. I sat through the rest of her toast in silence. My hands on the table. My jaw locked. Inside me, something ancient shifted. Some illusion I had protected for years crumbling under the weight of a single sentence. When the applause came, I didn't clap. I just stared ahead, nodding slowly, as if I were listening to something no one else could hear. The final nail in a coffin I didn't realize I had already been buried in. And that's when it truly sank in. This wasn't a wedding. It was an audit. An audit of my worth. And I had failed. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't rise from my chair with a red face or clenched fists. I didn't knock over a glass or shout her name across the dance floor. That would have given them too much to talk about. Michael lost it at the reception, or the stepfather couldn't handle the joke. I didn't want to be a story told behind wine glasses. I'd already been rewritten enough. Instead, I sat there and nodded once. Just once. A quiet, final agreement. Not with her, but with the reality she had delivered so effortlessly, so casually, as though it had always been known, just never spoken aloud. I had never been her father. I had only paid the part. They brought out the cake. Everyone clapped. Helen dabbed at her mascara. The music picked up again. I stood slowly, excusing myself with a murmur no one really heard, and walked toward the exit like a man finally leaving a play he hadn't realized was about him. No one followed. The parking lot was half empty, glittered with the reflections of headlights and the echoes of laughter from inside the hall. I got into my car without fumbling. My hands were steady. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't curse the sky. There was no explosion, just an internal clicking like a lock turning. On the drive home, the sky was black, the road empty. A stretch of dark Pennsylvania country between what had been expected of me and what I had just accepted. I kept the radio off. I didn't want lyrics. I didn't want noise. I just wanted the silence, the kind that's not absence but aftermath. At home, I took off my shoes at the door. Habit. Even then, I walked to the office, the one room in the house that still felt like mine, and sat at my desk. The laptop blinked awake with the usual familiarity. Password. Biometric check. Two-factor authentication. All the gates I had built to protect something I hadn't realized would be turned against me. I opened the accounts, one by one. Lauren's student loan assistance? Cancelled. Not delayed. Not paused. Cancelled. Her monthly rent transfers? Gone. The recurring auto payment for her car insurance? Revoked. Her credit card? Mine. Linked to my account. I deactivated it with 2 clicks. The interface asked, "Would you like to notify the user?" I unchecked the box. I moved on. The family phone plan, my name on the bill. I removed her number, then Helen's. They could set up their own. Health insurance? That took longer. I had to go through the portal, click through buried menus, confirm that Lauren was over 26 and no longer a dependent. She wasn't, not anymore. If she ever had been. The wedding venue's remaining balance, set to auto-deduct from my savings account after the final invoice. I removed my banking information, replaced it with another account. Dan's, Lauren's biological father. The man who had shown up to the rehearsal dinner wearing sunglasses indoors and a second wife half her age. The man who toasted to our daughter and then left early, citing a headache and a tea time the next morning. I had seen his name listed as a co-host on the printed programs. That was new. No one had mentioned it to me, but there it was in bold serif, hosted with love by Helen and Dan. Not Michael. Not the man who signed the first tuition check or the second or the third. No sponsor, right? Dan had stood during the father-daughter dance. Lauren had smiled like a child again, resting her head on his shoulder as the music played. Everyone thought it was sweet. Redemption. Reconciliation. They didn't see how his hands trembled. They didn't see how Helen whispered something in his ear like she was giving him instructions. They didn't see me. Now Dan would see the bills, the weight, the fine print, the deferred obligations I had carried for the better part of a decade. It was only fair. They had made him a father again in public. Now he could be one in private, too. I moved fast through the rest. Tuition guarantees? Revoked. Tax-dependent status? Updated. Legal documents for estate planning? Adjusted. I left nothing to chance. I traced every line where my name existed for Lauren's benefit and began erasing it. If I was not a father, then I would not perform like one. No more silent underwriting of another man's legacy. By the time I was finished, the sky was turning a muted gray. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel revenge. I felt precision. Cold, mechanical certainty. I had performed my role long enough. I had paid the dues, worn the mask, showed up to the dinners, endured the comparisons. I had bent myself into a man who gave without needing to be seen. And now that absence had been formalized. You're not my real father. No, Lauren. I'm not. Not anymore. I closed the laptop. My eyes burned, but I didn't let them close yet. I sat there, letting the weight settle into my bones, letting the quiet fill me. There was no speech, no grand confrontation, just a reshuffling of names, of rights, of responsibilities. Helen was still at the reception. No messages, no calls. Maybe she thought I'd be back, that I just needed air, that I'd come home like I always did, quiet, dependable, numb. Maybe she believed, deep down, that I'd never actually stop carrying them. But I had. That night, I didn't sleep in our bedroom. I stayed in the office. Door closed. Lights off. My phone buzzed once. Some app notification about a decline charge. I ignored it. Let the consequences arrive before the people did. Let the foundation crack before they noticed the house was tilting. I slept in the chair. Not well, but well enough. Morning arrived without ceremony. No one texted to ask where I had gone. No one called to see if I had made it home. The silence was perfect, and in that silence, something shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for validation, for gratitude, for inclusion. I had done what they'd always expected of me. I paid, just not anymore. At 6 a.m., the automation began. The venue's outstanding invoice transferred to the new payer. The final catering installment bounced back to Dan. The photography package, still awaiting payment, redirected. Each transaction had been scheduled during the night to process at dawn. Each one carried a notification. Each one generated a call. By 8:15 a.m., my phone began to vibrate. It didn't stop. Helen. Twice. Then Lauren. Then an unknown number I recognized as the wedding planner's office. I didn't answer any of them. I set my phone face down and let it rattle across the desk like a dying thing. By 9 o'clock, I heard the front door open. Helen. She didn't call my name, didn't shout or whisper. She just moved through the house with that purposeful quiet that meant she was deciding how angry she was allowed to be. I remained in the office. Door closed. She passed by once, paused, then continued to the kitchen. Her phone call wasn't loud, but I heard enough. What do you mean it didn't go through? No, I don't know why it would have changed. Can't you just call Dan? Because he's listed, isn't he? On the invoice. I didn't handle that part. Yes, I understand, but fine. Just hold the contract, please. I'll figure it out. The line went dead. 10 seconds later, her knuckles tapped my door. Michael! I didn't respond. The doorknob shifted slightly, then stopped. She waited. When I still didn't say anything, she walked away. I stared at the wood grain, counted the knots in it. By 10:45 a.m., Lauren's name flashed on the screen again, then again, Then Helen knocked once more, harder this time. "I need to speak with you." I stood and opened the door slowly. She was standing there in her heels, hair still styled from the wedding, makeup smudged at the corners. Her eyes searched mine like they expected to find something broken. "What's going on?" she asked. I waited, said nothing. "Michael, the venue says the final payment didn't go through, and the caterer, and the photographer, and I reassigned everything to Dan," I said. Her face froze. "What?" "His name is on the invitation, on the contracts. You co-hosted the wedding with him, so now he can co-pay for it." Her lips parted. A moment of silence before the panic could reach her voice. "You're not serious." "I'm exact." She shook her head. "We already agreed." "No, you agreed. Paid." "Michael, this is insane. You can't just." "I did." The tears came faster than I expected. She leaned against the doorframe like she needed support just to stand. "Why now?" she whispered. I didn't answer. "You've never," she swallowed. "You've always been the one who." "I'm not anymore." She stared at me. Then the mask cracked. "She didn't mean it," she said. "She was nervous. It was a joke. You know how Lauren is." "It wasn't a joke," I said calmly. "It was a verdict. Yours too." Her hand went to her mouth, but she said nothing. For once, nothing. I closed the door. By noon, the chaos had spread. Lauren's bank tried to charge the account tied to her car insurance. Failed. Her landlord's auto payment bounced. Her health insurance showed a lapse in eligibility. The first panic message came then. "Lauren, 12:17 p.m. Hey, my card got declined? Is something wrong with the account? I think the rent bounced too. Can you fix it, please?" No greeting. No punctuation. No mention of the night before. "Lauren, 12:39 p.m. Dad? Dad?" Funny how that word only returned when the power went out. I didn't respond. Helen came back to the door at 1:10 p.m. This time she didn't knock. She opened it. "She's freaking out," she said. "Everything's unraveling." I stayed seated. "She can't get a hold of Dan. He's not answering. He said he'd pay, but now he's saying he needs time. That he didn't expect to." She stopped, shook her head. "Michael, you're punishing her for what? A speech?" "I'm relieving myself," I said, "of a role I was never given, only used for." "She's your daughter. She's your daughter." Helen looked as if I'd slapped her. She blinked. Once, twice. "You don't mean that." "I do. She lived in this house for 10 years. I paid for it. She came to you for advice when she needed help with forms. You watched her grow up, grow away." The silence after that was heavy, dense. Helen finally said, "She'll lose her apartment, her insurance, maybe even her job. There are consequences." "I know." "Then help her." She made it clear she already had a father. Helen's voice broke then. "Dan isn't going to help her." "I know. You're just going to watch her drown?" "No," I said. "I'm going to watch her swim." That evening, more messages came. "Lauren, 5:08 p.m. This is serious. I just got a notice from the leasing office. If I don't pay by the 5th, I'm out." "What happened?" "Lauren, 6:02 p.m. Mom said you canceled everything." "Why? After all these years?" "Lauren, 6:17 p.m. Please don't do this. I didn't mean it. I was nervous. Everyone was watching." "Lauren, 6:20 p.m. I didn't think you'd take it that seriously." There it was. I didn't think you'd take it that seriously. Not I didn't mean it. Not I was wrong. Just surprised that the man who always took the hit had finally stepped aside. By 9 p.m. the panic had matured into desperation. Helen sat on the couch. She hadn't spoken since dinner. Lauren kept calling. Dan had messaged her once, Helen told me. Something about needing to check his finances. Then silence. No hero's return. No fatherly rescue. Just another ghost. By 10 p.m. the house was still. I sat in the office with the door open, letting the quiet bleed in. Then the knock came, hesitant, soft. Helen stood there, eyes hollow. "She's coming tomorrow." I looked up. "She said she wants to talk to you." I didn't respond. Helen stepped back. "Will you speak to her?" "I already did," I said. "She just didn't hear me." And then I closed the door again. She arrived just after noon. No knocking. Just the slow sound of her car pulling into the driveway like it was unfamiliar ground. I stood behind the living room curtain, watching through the narrow seam as she stepped out. Hair tied back. Jacket one size too thin for the wind. No makeup, no jewelry. Nothing like the girl in the wedding photos framed and posted across social media just days before. Lauren walked up to the front door with a kind of caution I'd only ever seen after her first breakup at 17. When she sat in the kitchen crying into her cereal, asking how love could just vanish. I wanted to tell her then that love didn't vanish. It just evolved. Sometimes into silence. Sometimes into this. I didn't open the door right away. Helen stood behind me, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "Let her in," she said softly after a beat too long. I turned the knob and stepped back. Lauren entered the house like a stranger. She looked around as though expecting something to be different, as if my decision would have rearranged the furniture. She didn't meet my eyes, just stood there on the rug she used to toss her shoes onto like it was nothing. She never did learn to say thank you. Now she just stood there, mute. Helen gestured toward the couch. "Sit down." We all did. No one spoke for a full minute. Then Lauren finally broke the silence. "I didn't mean it that way," she said, eyes still on the carpet. I let the words hang in the air. I didn't respond. I wanted to see if she could bear her own voice. "I was nervous," she continued. "I didn't plan to say it like that. It just came out." "You practiced the speech," I said. My voice was low, measured. She blinked. "What?" "It was written, rehearsed. You weren't reading off the cuff." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You didn't just say it," I said. "You believed it. I didn't know it would hurt you like that." "That's the point." She looked at me then. Finally, the eyes I had watched cry over scraped knees and prom dates now rimmed with adult shame. Not regret, shame. The difference mattered. Helen shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. "You've always made room for Dan. Even when he left, even when he forgot, even when he only showed up for photos. And I never stopped you. I understood. You wanted a father. I just didn't know I wasn't ever in the running." "That's not true," she said, too quickly. "Isn't it?" I asked. She looked down again. I continued. "When you graduated college, whose name was on the letter confirming your tuition? When your car broke down in the snow, who drove 2 hours to find you in the dark? When you got rejected from every job after college and needed rent for 6 months, who paid without asking for it back?" "You," she whispered. I nodded. "And when you stood in front of your friends and family, on the most important day of your life, who did you call your sponsor?" She flinched. "You didn't just erase me," I said. "You recategorized me. You filed me next to the florist and the caterer. Disposable. Contractual. I didn't mean it. But you accepted it." She swallowed hard. "I just didn't think it mattered." And there it was. The truth. I didn't think it mattered. Not just the words. The years. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, her car sat half-parked over the line. Her usual way. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. Behind me, I heard her voice again. "Dan said he can't pay. He said he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility." A beat. "I don't know what to do." I turned. "You built your life on a man who never stayed," I said. "And you disowned the one who did. That's what you did." "I know," she said, voice breaking. "I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a choice." Helen stood now too. "Michael, please. She came here. She's trying." "No," I said again, looking at both of them. "She's not. She's hoping." Lauren's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" I stepped closer. You're hoping I'll feel sorry for you, that I'll undo it, that I'll fall back into the role you finally admitted I was never meant to have. You want the money, the safety, the support, but you don't want me. That's not. It is, she cried then, fully, the way children do when they realize the world is not rearranged by tears. It didn't move me, not this time, because this was not the first time I had been forgotten. It was just the first time I stopped volunteering for it. Why are you being so cruel? She asked through her tears. I took a long breath, held it. Cruel would have been leaving you the way Dan did. Cruel would have been reminding you of what I paid for every time I wrote a check. Cruel would have been charging interest. She wiped her face. Then what is this? This, I said, is a boundary. Silence. Then, I don't have anywhere else to go. You have family, I said. The kind that fits your definition. She looked at Helen. Her mother didn't speak. She just turned away, as if the weight of her own choices had finally reached her. I'll figure it out, Lauren said, standing abruptly. Don't worry. I won't ask for anything else. She walked to the door, hand on the knob. But before she left, I said one last thing. You called me Dad once, when you were 16. She stopped. I carried that word like a medal, I said. Wore it into every meeting, every job, every payment. You said it once. I remembered it for years. She didn't turn around, just stood there frozen. Words matter, I said. So do silences. Then she opened the door and left. Later that night, I found the framed photo of us from her high school graduation. Her in cap and gown. Me in a wrinkled suit, arm around her shoulder. Smiling like I had won something, like I had built something permanent. I took it down from the mantel, placed it in a drawer. Not out of bitterness, out of accuracy. It was a document of fiction. Forgery. One I had been complicit in for too long. That night, Helen and I didn't speak. Not over dinner. Not in bed. I heard her breathing shift around 3 mm. Sharp and ragged. Like someone trying not to cry. I didn't reach for her. This was not punishment. This was revelation. A week passed. Lauren did not return. She sent one message, short, to the point. I understand. I won't contact you again. I'm sorry. No request. No manipulation. Just an ending. It should have hurt. Instead, it felt like a book closing. The last page turned. Helen and I continued our routine. Work. Dinners. Mail. But something between us had shifted. Not broken. Just quieted. She asked once if I regretted it. No, I said. She nodded but didn't ask again. Sometimes the pain in her eyes looked like mourning. I didn't comfort her. She chose her silence. Kept mine. Now I sit alone in the same office where I rewrote our lives. The same desk. The same chair. My phone has stopped buzzing. The world has moved on, as it always does when it realizes the source is no longer flowing. The house is quieter now. No footsteps overhead. No background music. No clinking of plates or open invitations. Just the stillness of a life unburdened. And I ask myself in that silence, was I cruel? Was I wrong to demand respect after years of silence? Or did I simply reclaim what they had taken, my dignity, my presence, my voice? They called me sponsor. I accepted that label. For too long. Now I wear a different one. Absent. Not missing. Absent by choice. So I ask you, if you had given everything to a child who stood before a crowd and erased you with a smile, what would you have done? Would you have stayed? Or would you have finally let go?